Good morning, folks. It's good to see so many of you out this morning. I know you would have received a late notice from us in the wee hours of the morning inviting you here, but you have obliged us. Thank you very much. We're here this morning. There are a number of issues that the NDC would love to address. It would appear, given all that we have seen of the government's operations, that we appear to have a runaway government on our hand, and our democracy is under threat. And so there are a number of issues that we're going to be dealing with. Paramount will be, of course, the what is happening at the elections office at this point. But there are other issues that, and the land issue that is very current. But there are other issues that, we're going to do the build up to now. And so, without further ado, again, I'll tell you good morning, and I'm going to hand you over to our political leader who will begin with the Nazim Burke. The three persons who will address you this morning are our senators, Senator George Vincent, our party chair, and Senator Franca Bernadine, who is also our PRO. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you very much, Randall. And let me say a very good morning, first of all, to the members of the media, and to join with Randall in expressing our regrets for the very late notice that we have sent you. As I think you would appreciate yourselves, events in Grenada are unfolding at a daily pace. I mean, what we're seeing is every day something is happening that is drawing the attention of the local media, that is drawing the attention of the population. Things that call into question the quality of governance that this country has had. Just over the last 24 hours, we were able to put together a list of incidents that we will share with you today, a list that chronicles the new National Party's attacks on the laws of the country, the institutions of the country, the norms, the conventions, and the protocols that we have witnessed in the last less than 400 days. And to have, within 400 days, 20 events of this kind, where laws are broken, or institutions are violated, or conventions are broken, or norms are departed from, to have 20 of those in the space of 400 days means that the government is engaged in some kind of lawless behavior every 20 days. That is really what we see. The government is engaged in some kind of lawless or reckless behavior every 20 days. And in no other country of the world can I picture something like this happening. No other civilized country. It might be happening in one or two rogue states around the world, but as far as we know, there's no civilized country in which this is happening. And we can start, I think it's important to mention them because the public must know them and the public must hear them. So when we say that these things are happening and they're cause for concern, we are not merely sounding on alarm bells on duty. We are pointing to things that are easily verifiable. And that is why we say that in the age in which we live, politicians can be held accountable because people can verify information. If I come to you today and I say that the IMF gave Grenada $400 million, all you have to do is go onto the IMF website, look up and see whether they gave Grenada $400,000. Prime Minister Gary might have been able to get away with that in 1970. Nobody can get away with it today. So anything we say to you, you can verify. And what we're seeing is these continuing attacks. We start with the removal of the Commissioner of Police, appointed by the Public Service Commission, which is a constitutional body set up by the Constitution with the authority to appoint public officers. This official was removed from office without unceremoniously by the Prime Minister within days of coming into office, and replaced with a retiree, as a result of which we are now paying 2 commissioners of police. We have the same thing happening with the Commissioner of Prisons. Again, appointed by the Public Service Commission, removed from office unceremoniously. We have the removal of the Cabinet Secretary, appointed by the Public Service Commission, We understand that recently she was appointed to a non-established position in the public service, something I believe is called the Executive Director of the Money Laundering Commission. Whereas she was accountable to the Prime Minister and to the Cabinet before, she is now accountable to the Attorney General, which is in effect a demotion in her rank as established, appointed Cabinet Secretary. We have the enactment of sections 6, 16 and 25 of the Electronic Crimes Bill, which criminalized the transmission of electronic information that were considered offensive by those in authority, even when the information was true. In other words, the law provided that even if the information that you transmit is true, as long as it is grossly offensive, you can be held, you can be jailed, you can go to jail for a year, and you can be fined $100,000. It was the pressure of the International Press Institute, the local media, foreign media, and of course those who were able to speak up, our friend in St. Vincent and so on, who were able to bring pressure on the government to finally repeal that very odious piece of legislation. Then of course we had the amendment to the terrorism bill. That here again, the law was amended, the Terrorism Act, so as to allow the Attorney General the authority to declare any person in Grenada a terrorist and any organization in Grenada a terrorist organization. Yes? Something that is unknown in most countries of the world, because the standard practice is that countries follow the list of terrorist organizations and persons that is prepared and circulated by the United Nations General Security Council. So this is not something that we take lightly. Then of course we have the passage in the lower house of the Interception of Wire Communication Amendment Bill. It did not become law finally because of the fight that was put up in the Senate against it, but this was an amendment that was going to authorize the government to tap the phones, to wiretap the phones, to bug the phones of those persons whom they felt did something or said something that was contrary to the economic interests of the state. So I had to put the question, what if the government determines that the structural adjustment program is in the interest of the state, is in the economic interest of the state? And what if I decide I'm going to challenge that program or disagree with that program? Would the answer be that by virtue of my disagreement with that program, the government is then authorized to bug my phones to hear what I have to say? This is the problem that we're facing. Then of course, we had the decision by the cabinet of the country to install internet services in the parliamentary offices around the country and put the voter registration system on a shared network with the office of the Prime Minister. What does that do? In principle and in theory, whether it will happen in fact or not, in theory, what this does is that it puts the office at the disposal of the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office. It means that in principle, the Prime Minister's office can, somebody in the Prime Minister's office can sit in that office and access the voter registration system in the electoral office. And of course, I think we well know that, and we'll talk about that a little bit, but we know that when Sister Julie Benoit spoke up against this and said it was contrary to Section 35 of the Constitution, which says that the supervisor of elections must take must not act on the authority or decisions of anybody else. No other person or authority must tell them what to do. She, of course, was summarily fired in the face of Section 35 of the Constitution, which gives her the right to say that. Now, we've seen on two occasions the appointment of Minister Gregory Bowen, the trained and professional engineer, as the Attorney General of Grenada, as the acting Attorney General of Grenada. The Constitution, Section 70 says, the Attorney General of Grenada shall be the senior legal advisor of the government. So you cannot be an Attorney General if you're not an attorney. That is a basic principle. It is rudimentary. You cannot be the Attorney General if you're not an attorney. So somebody who is not an attorney, an engineer by profession, in spite of what the Constitution says, the government decided both in September and in February, September of last year and February of this year, to have him act as the Attorney General. We've seen the appointment of Ms. Ananda Trotman Joseph, the wife of the President of the Senate, as the Deputy Chairman of the Integrity Commission. A situation that will now put Ms. Ananda Trotman in the unpleasant position where her husband will have to file a declaration to the Integrity Commission that includes her own resources, assets, income, and so on. In effect, she will be filing a declaration to herself. Something that is, as far as we are concerned, incestuous, politically speaking, incestuous, and defies all appearance of propriety in our laws and our situation. We've seen the appointment of Ms. Ananda Trotman Joseph, wife of Senator Lawrence Joseph, President of the Senate, as an agent under the Economic Citizenship by Investment Program. We've seen the appointment of the Senator Lawrence Joseph himself as the President, as an agent, even though the two persons are engaged in a private practice together. We are not saying that these are bad people. What we are saying is you're putting them in a position where, first of all, there is an appearance of impropriety and conflict, and secondly, should something happen, God forbid, they will be called upon to do things that nobody wants to do. I would not want to investigate my wife. I'm sure that Ms. Trotman Joseph would not want to investigate her husband if something went wrong. They must not be put in that position. They have to sleep together at night. And the Prime Minister has a responsibility not to do things like this. We've seen the appointment of Ms. Leslie Sion, Chairman, it's important, Chairman of the Industrial Development Corporation, the IDC, and wife of Mr. David Holocauf. We've seen, who is the Chairman of the Citizenship by Investment Screening Committee. We've seen her appointed as an agent under the Citizenship by Investment Program. The same is true for Ms. Michelle Emmanuel Steele, wife of Mr. Nicholas Steele, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Business, and who in fact is emerging as the chief government spokesman on the Citizenship by Investment Program. His wife has now been appointed as a senator. We've seen the effective appointment of Mr. Tafara Pei, husband of the Honorable Emlyn Pei, the Minister for Youth, Sports and Religious Affairs, as the effective director of the Financial Intelligence Unit. Something that is contrary to the rules and practice of the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, which makes it quite clear that you do not appoint in the position of director of the FIU a politically exposed person. In other words, if, God forbid, something happens that warrants a financial investigation into the affairs of Ms. Emlyn Pei, her husband should not be called upon as director of the FIU to investigate her financial dealings. This again we see as completely out of whack, and in fact, not only is it inconsistent with the standards and international best practice, it also violates Section 15 of the Financial Intelligence Unit Act, which also makes it quite clear that a politically exposed person ought not to be the director of the FIU. Most recently, we've seen the removal of Mr. Rupert McBurney as the systems administrator of the electronic voter registration and card issuance system at the Office of the Supervisor of Elections. And his replacement, we understand, is, from the reports that we've heard, is going to be a relative of an NNP parliamentarian. And this, of course, is what led, as we understand it, to the resignation of Mr. Aaron Francois. We are hearing, of course, that he's resigning for personal reasons and professional reasons and so on. But we invite the media to look beneath this, try to understand exactly what happened, because what we are hearing is Ms. Benoit has praised this gentleman extensively. Mr. Francois has praised him extensively, that is Mr. McGowan. He is one of the few persons trained by the Organization of American States in this system administration under our new system. It is widely known that the OAS came here between January 21st and February 8th of last year, at the request of former Prime Minister Tillman Thomas, investigated and evaluated our voter registration system and concluded that the system was fine and working and in standing order for the conduct of the election. No one has challenged that. And what we're seeing today is that on the insistence of Mr. Francois, that this gentleman ought to be kept, there's no reason to remove him, and the insistence on the part of the government that he has to go, Mr. Francois appears to have decided that to save his professional integrity, he's going to step aside from that job. We've seen the daily appearance by Senator Sheldon Scott, the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Religious Affairs, for 2 hours per day, Monday to Friday, during working hours, on an established NNP talk show program, Hard Talk, on private radio, for which the government is paying $7,200 a month to a salary for him. Yes, he appears on this program weekly, daily, Hard Talk, and says he's free to do what he wants as long as the Prime Minister asks him to do what he's doing. We've seen the payment of ministerial salaries, perks and benefits to 3 MPs who have no ministerial responsibility, who have no ministerial portfolio, who have no jobs, but are simply being paid salaries as if they were ministers. I'm speaking here of the MP for St. Patrick East, the MP for St. Andrew Southwest, and the MP for St. George Northeast. Yeah, these 3 persons are receiving ministerial salaries, they have no responsibility, and of course, taxpayers have to pay this. We've seen the attempts by the government to increase the rates of property taxes by issuing an SRO on December the 12th without observance of the property laws of the country. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But we've also seen the appointment of 3 confirmed and appointed permanent secretaries. People who are confirmed, established as permanent secretaries, not acting, confirmed and appointed in their position as permanent secretaries, as the head of administrative ministries, as is normally the case. We've seen 3 of these people being put to head up units and divisions in ministries under other PSs and under other acting PSs, in spite of the fact that these people are established permanent secretaries. And this, we have surmised, is largely due to perceptions about their political opinions and their political affiliations. So these 20 items we believe are important. The public must understand them, the public must know about them. We will share them with you and kindly ask you to investigate them. Don't take our word for it, investigate them. And if you see that they're happening and they're wrong, we urge you please to tell the nation about it. People must understand what is going on. Something is terribly wrong. And this is our main concern at this point. But I want to say a few more words on 2 items. One is the voter registration system. As I mentioned a little earlier, we have a voter registration system. A new voter registration system and card issuance system was introduced in Grenada less than 2 years ago. This system was paid for. A firm was retained in Canada. A well-known firm was retained in Canada to do this job. The system was checked. Thousands of persons were registered under the system for the new elections of 2013. We called the OAS assisted in the supervision and installation of the system and advised the electoral office throughout this exercise. Because in the first place, this measure was taken in response to a recommendation that was made by the OAS itself back in 2008 as a post-election measure that should have been taken. When the system was installed, the Prime Minister requested of the OAS in late January of 2013 to come in and please evaluate the system and be sure that it is ready for use in the upcoming elections. They came in, and between January 21st and February 8th, they conducted a full investigation of the system, evaluation of the system. They have published a report which is available for all to see. You can find it on the website. Yes? So this is the report that they prepared that says exactly what the assessment of the voter registration system was before the elections were conducted. If you read this report, you can find it on all the websites, on their website. You will see that they were extremely pleased with the report. They pointed out several things, and if I may just quote you one of the things that they said. They said that while the OAS team saw areas for improvement in terms of technical capacity of internal information, personnel as well as procedures for internal cooperation, its verification of the electoral database indicated strong levels of accuracy and reliability. There was no question about what was going on. According to the report, the house-to-house survey and voter registration attested to the integrity of the voter registration database. In 98% of the cases, there was almost perfect correspondence between the place of residence provided by the citizen and the constituency in which that citizen was registered. Among those surveyed who claimed to have registered to vote, 95% appeared on the most recent version of the electoral electoral list. This is a document, these are extracts were taken from this document, which we want to encourage you to read, because it says very clearly what was going on. As such, we saw no reason in the immediate aftermath of the elections, where 15 seats had been won by one party, we saw no reason whatsoever to attempt to change or to manipulate anything in relation to the electoral system. Those who came as observers for the elections, they concluded that the elections were fairly conducted. It was a free and fair election. We have never taken issue with the conduct of the elections. We have never taken issue with it. So we cannot see why the ruling party that won all 15 seats can have any issue with the elections or the conduct of the elections. And in fact, they have never suggested that they have any issues with the conduct of the elections itself. Yet, on the 28th of August 2013, Ms. Lana McPhail, acting in her capacity as Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Works, wrote to the Supervisor of Elections, saying to her, please be advised that Cabinet at its meeting on July 29, 2013, approved the use of the following centers for registration into the MPID system and issuance of cards, and listed all of the electoral offices. Yes? Cabinet also directed that the staff of the electoral office work with the MPID system for registration and issuance of cards. Further, Cabinet also authorized the installation of internet services at all the sites. Please note that the ministry has instructed LINE to undertake the installation as a matter of urgency. This is something that the Constitution says the Supervisor of Elections under Section 35 must not answer to any other person or authority other than the Governor General. Yet, the Cabinet is sending a memo to the Supervisor of Elections telling her, we are installing internet in the electoral offices whether you like it or not. This violates the Constitution of the country. And Prime Minister Mitchell, who has been in Parliament for 30 years, who has been Prime Minister for 14 years, he understands this. He knows that before you become a Prime Minister, or before you become a Minister of Government, you are required to take an oath that you will uphold the Constitution of the country, so help me God. If you do not take that oath, you will not be allowed to hold the office. So he knows this, yes? But yet, they took this position. And when Sister Judy Benoit decided that this was unacceptable, and she sent a little memo in reply saying to Ms. McPhail, we can't do this. It violates the Constitution. She read out and gave a detailed account saying, this is wrong. You cannot do this. It violates Section 35 of the Constitution. And furthermore, I brought this to the attention of the Minister already, and the Minister told me he was going to send the Attorney General to meet with me. And that meeting has not taken place. Yet, when she wrote this letter, she was fired from her job. And of course, we've seen that she is removed from the job. Another person of integrity is put on the job as acting supervisor of elections, only to find that in that position now, he has to contend with the removal of Mr. Rupert McBurney as assistant administrator. And when he challenges it, when he questions it, they say, take it or leave it, and his reaction is to resign, quietly resign, understanding the weight of the pressure that is being brought upon him and the importance of this office. We are very concerned about this creeping violation against the rights of the people of Grenada. We are very concerned about this unfolding one-party state, which some of the surrogates of the new National Party have indicated they want to see happen. We are very concerned that we are moving away from a civilized nation into a rogue state. And that is why we must speak up against these things. And that is why we call on all persons, all of the people of interest, all those who support democracy, who understand that our country and our government, our constitution is based on the recognition of the supremacy of God and the respect for the democratic way of life. That is what our constitution is based on. So when we see this violation, we must express concern, we must express alarm. And that is why we are going to be taking some action against this to sensitize the public. In defense of the integrity of the electoral office, we will visit the electoral office tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. We are calling on all those who love democracy, whether you're from the NMP or the NDC, whether you're from the Fishermen's or the Farmers Union or Association. whether you're from the trade unions or the NGOs, whoever you are, the media, we ask you to come out and to join us in defending the integrity of the electoral office. Something wrong is happening. Let's not remain quiet about this. I will stop there, and we will take some more questions as the time arises. Yeah, thank you very much.
Good morning to the press. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to communicate with the public, which you are facilitating here for us this morning. And I just wanted to underscore some of the points made by our political leader of the NDC, Nazenberg. He has read an array of violations that have taken place over the last week or two, and indeed over the last few months. And they must be of great concern to us if we are Grenadians, great concern, whether here or internationally. The press has a serious responsibility to listen carefully to what is happening and to report back to the people. It is our duty and responsibility to point out the irregularities taking place in our system. And it could not be any more clearly articulated as to what the concerns of this party are with respect to Grenada, its management, what is happening as expressed by the political leader of the NDC. I want perhaps to refer first and foremost to where he ended, which is the document on the assessment and evaluation of the new voters registration system in Grenada. And what comes to mind is, what is there a need? Why is there a need to fix what is already fixed? You have in your hand a document produced in February of 2013 saying this system is absolutely acceptable. Yet we find the violations that he has outlined in two major assaults on the system. It is absolutely imperative that Grenadians examine this carefully, because it doesn't matter what happens in what system, wherever. If we are not able to vote and express our decisions clearly and through a system that allows us to do so, it's the most fundamental violation of our rights as people. I wanted to underscore that. The second aspect that he referred to in the course of his dialogue was the whole issue of conflict of interest. And I want to pause here to mention, conflict of interest means you are representing 2 or 3 different interests. It could be more, in whatever circumstances that is before us. He has outlined that the agents selected to do the job under the Economic Citizenship Act, and the document is here. The newspaper outlining who are in fact are the agents. The only one that has been added to this, as you know, is Mrs. Leslie Ann Sion, who happens to be the chairperson of the IDC, and whose husband also happens to be the chairman of the body that's appointing who in fact goes forward as a citizen or not. Now, that's what we mean by conflict of interest. You're representing the interests of several groups of people, and it is not fair to the person, it's also not fair to the recipients, the country, because you must have people who are independent of the process, and I think that's the point that he's emphasizing. Further to that, what causes us some concern is that we are told, and it's going through the upper house tomorrow in the Senate, that we don't need to know who becomes a citizen. Well, if you look at what is happening in other countries, and I draw reference here to the Prime Minister of Antigua, Mr. Baldwin Spencer. There's a lovely photograph, which we're going to distribute, of him handing over citizenship to the first Syrian family under the Citizens by Investment program in Antigua. There's also a long article on it. So there's a photograph. I want to express my regret there of the little piece of the photograph there that did not come through. The correct full picture will be out with me tomorrow. But you can see him very clearly on it. And you can also see the article quite clearly on it. And it says, I know as a Grenadian everything I need to know about Mr. Georges, who has been given. I know what his wife looks like, I know what his children look like, I know that he's an investor, I know where his investments are. It says he operates out of Dubai. He has a lot of important investments, and a full explanation of who he is and how the Antigua people welcome him. So I don't know what this is really about the fact that we don't need to know. If it is in the United States, as many of you know, for example, another country, you are part of a system, clear and transparent. You come forward to say your oath, you come forward, everybody knows who you are, you can watch the ceremony. But in Grenada, we don't need to know who is becoming a citizen. Now, I ask that you examine this carefully and think about it. Think about its implications and the fact that you may not know who in fact is a citizen with the same rights and privileges as your children. Bearing in mind our prior experience with this same government, when they began this process under what they call the same program. But in that one, it was only a sale of passports. And I want to say that that is still very much in circulation, and many of us keep copies of the long list of people who belong in that grouping, the economic citizenship. Here they are. This is the act. And this is the act with the adjustments that we have made. But there is a list of persons who own passports. Here they are. And a lot of foreign countries, nothing wrong, as long as it's legitimate and legal and we all know about it and they've had their full due diligence and everything else done. But there are people without their nationalities, the original nationalities listed here. There are people with two names on one passport. This is what put Grenada into problems the first time with the Canadian government. Whether we want to admit it or not, the evidence is there and has been presented in Senate by your opposition senators. The list and what was the comment by the officer of the Canadian Visa Office. So we understand that's a flaw in the system. We have a new system now by investment and we can't get to hear who in fact is becoming Grenadian or not. That is cause for Grenadians to get very, very concerned. Every Grenadian is registered publicly and we must be aware of who they are and what is happening. The senior legal advisor, this is amazing to me. This is the government gazette, okay, in which it was listed. So this is not speculation, it's on this page here. And we've highlighted it quite clearly that Mr. Gregory Bowen was in fact your Attorney General in September for a period of time, and to our dismay, became the Attorney General again in February. Now, it may be brushed off lightly, but think about this. If a legal crisis occurs in this country, heaven forbid, that's what you put people in place for. The person to advise us to how to come out of this legal loop is a man who has never studied a day of law. And what we're saying here is that there is an element of recklessness that bothers us in this government, whereby people grab and put, we hear all manner of substitution going on. That is not how a government in a country ought to run. That is not how, it's not an acceptable standard. We must follow procedures accordingly. And it is very disturbing, particularly to the older people in this society, and to the young people who are not prepared to put up with it. The fact that this sort of reckless approach to important issues, like who acts as Attorney General, cast back your minds as Grenadians into the past and tell me one occasion in which you had an Attorney General who was not a lawyer. Indeed, the best of the legal minds were brought in from the Caribbean, right here. I can remember N.E.A. Berridge as being one of the last before we appointed one of ours, who came in from Antigua, a senior legal person. So these are areas, that's all, for our concern. The backbenchers' salaries, and I beg and crave your indulgence for a minute more because it is going to come up as well in the Senate tomorrow. And we hear so much concern expressed. And it is for all of us, on the economic picture of what is happening in Grenada and how money should be spent and should not be spent and so on. Yet and for all, in the documents presented to the senators for dialogue tomorrow and discussion, we had asked the question, what does a government backbencher earn? Here are the particulars. The salary is $1,224.98. The duty allowance, $1,000. The entertainment allowance, $400. The internet allowance, $99. Telephone, $57. All very reasonable. The personal allowance is $4,435. It's a personal allowance. amounting to a total of $7,215.98, paid according to the document given to us to be debated in the Senate tomorrow, paid to government backbenchers. Never happened in your previous government. Never happened. Indeed, the salaries we received as ministers, and I know from my own portfolio, was just over $5,000 with allowances that added up to personal allowance $6,200. And that required a tremendous amount of effort, as you are well aware, as a minister, to make things happen within your ministry. There are people in this government who own $7,215.98 for just saying that they're a government backbencher, right? And then they have a separate allowance for their constituency. And these are the things that we must highlight and bring to the people. I want to stop right there and hand over to you.
Thank you,
Chair.
Microphone.
Good morning, press. Good morning, Grenada. Good morning, friends and relatives who are here. I want to focus my 5 minutes this morning on the 5 issues that have been retracted since this government took over, to demonstrate the poor management, the decisions made in haste, the reckless approach that is taken to the governance and the management of our country. Some of the issues retracted, we are very pleased with them through the efforts of the media and the Senate backbench, the Senate opposition and John Public as a whole. Our mission here today is to try to get them to retract another one, which is what Sister Franca had so eloquently exposed in telling us who has applied for our passports and who has become our citizens. The first one was done in haste is the enactment of the Electronic Crimes Act. And Section 6, 16, and 25 have been retracted after much pressure. We are pleased for that. This indicates that this was done in quite haste, and we are not sure if there were ulterior motives for that decision. The second was the Wire Communications Amendment Bill, which, as Brother Nas says, contrary to the economic interests of the state, they had tried to intercept. We have been able to beat back this and got a change in the legislation. The third issue, which shows the gross incompetence, is the issue of the fees proposed during the budget presentation of $5 for every visitor per night who comes to our country. This was hastily retracted because the Hotel and Tourism Association indicated that they were not aware that this was coming, so this had to be taken back. This again shows the lack of communication with the stakeholders in decision making and the hasty decisions that have been taken by this government. The fourth thing we are asking, they are retracting this one, the names of the people with the citizens by investment, the applicants. We are asking to put that back because it is really important, as Sister Franca has said, to know who is becoming your fellow citizen. And the fifth one is the issue of sending out 15,000 notices to landowners throughout the country. And after they spent so much money to do that, used up civil servants' time, etc., etc., it became very clear that this may have been illegal and they do not have the proper procedures and criteria in place. So on April 1st, the Minister of Agriculture had to say it was a mistake and tried to blame it on the Inland Revenue Department. Folks, basically, I want to highlight these 5 things that we have hastily decided on. We have beaten back quite a few of them through our media and the people's concern. We want to call for, as I said, for us to know who are the folks that apply and receive our citizenship. And we are very concerned about our parliamentary democracy. And tomorrow, as our political leader has said, we want to show our strength by assembling at the parliamentary office so that we can have the government retreat from its practices of interference with institutions in Grenada, particularly that of the parliamentary office. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we open up for questions, there's just one issue that I would like very much to spend a minute on, and to ask that you take a close look at as members of the media, and that is the legality of the government's decision to increase property taxes. Our first look at this situation seemed to suggest very strongly that the law that is passed by the government to increase property taxes has no legal basis, and if it is correct, if we are correct in that view, then the citizens will have no responsibility to pay any increases in their property taxes. So we would like to put this on the table and ask you to take a closer look at it, because what we are seeing is a matter of some concern. Section 4, subsection 1 of the Property Tax Act, which is cap 257 of the laws of Grenada, 257B of the laws of Grenada, says this: the rate of tax shall, in respect of each class of property, be determined annually on or before the 30th day of November in the year preceding that for which such rate is applicable, and where no rate of tax is determined for any year, the existing rate of tax shall be the rate for that year. In other words, if the government is going to institute a new rate of taxes on property effective January 1st, they must determine the new rate of tax and notify the public by November the 30th of the year before. You can't do it in December. Because if you do it in December, you break the law, you break section 4 of the law, and that new tax will not be able to come into effect until the year after that. In other words, if government did not pass a law by November the 30th, 2013, saying that the new property tax rate will take effect by January 2014, that new law can only take effect in January 2015 because they did not meet the November 30th deadline. That's the law. With that law as it is, let me say the reason why this is there is to give people, property owners, an opportunity to reorder their affairs to meet this new tax situation. The Constitution of the country, which is the supreme law, guarantees the right of the individual to property and makes it unlawful for the government to interfere with your property or take away your property in any unlawful means by any unlawful circumstances. So, in recognition of this constitutional right and the importance of property, the law requires that you cannot put a new tax law in force by January 1st unless you notify the public by November 30th, giving them at least 31 clear days to try and reorder their affairs. In this case, the government did not do anything with the property taxes or pass any law as far as property taxes were concerned by November 30th. So what happened was, on the 13th of September, well, let me say first of all, on the 30th of September, the government passed an SRNO saying that they were going to, on the 13th of December, the government passed a new SRNO saying that they were going to introduce this new tax, property taxes. But the SRNO that was passed did not involve any amendment to the law. So the minister cannot simply decide to pass a ministerial order, because the law says that you must amend the provisions of the law in order to give effect to this new situation. Recognizing that they had not met the November deadline, the November 30th deadline, when the Parliament met on the 13th of December, the government passed a new amendment to the Property Tax Act. This amendment said, we are now amending the Property Tax Act to ensure that the deadline by which the government must give notice must now be December 31st and not November 30th. So on the 13th of December, they amend the law to say they are no longer required to give you notice November 30th, they must give you notice by December 31st for this law to take effect on January 1st. When you look at the situation, what do you see? The SRNO, which is the new law, the new provision that the minister put in place by the order to double taxes and so on, which was passed before that. The government cannot pass a law today saying that they're giving that retroactive effect. Because it is a general principle of the interpretation of statutes that all fiscal laws must be very strictly interpreted. In other words, do not give the government any breaks with that, because you interfere in people's property. So if the law says that this must happen by this date, the courts will not give you any break on it. And in this case, because you're trying to interfere with people's property, the court is not going to allow you to put an order in place that has any retroactive effect to say, I intended to tax you back from then, and I'm going to tax you with retroactive effect. So retroactive laws on taxes are generally not accepted by any country and in any laws. And if the government, even if we say that the SRNO was valid and good, it gives no notice to the population, because you can't come on the 31st of December and pass a law saying that on the 1st of January, a new law will take effect with property, giving no notice where people have always been given notices with respect to property taxes. So what we are doing right now is a more thorough investigation of this issue, because we firmly believe that the government has violated the Property Tax Act. And if that is correct, if we are correct in that interpretation, all of this stuff about doubling of property taxes and so on will be invalid. So we want to invite you, as members of the media, to join us in that investigation, to talk to other lawyers, speak to a property expert, speak to a constitutional expert, speak to a legal expert, and ask them. We are not here giving advice, legal advice. We must make the disclaimer. We are not here giving legal advice to anybody. Yes, that might be my interpretation of the law, and I could be perfectly wrong about it. Yes, it only struck me last night as I looked at the provisions. So it would require further examination. But I'm saying to you, it is my sense that what the government has done here with the property taxes may not be able to withstand the scrutiny of a court of law. And if that is so, then we must get it to the attention of the public very quickly, because it may mean that people may have no duties to pay any increase in their property taxes. I don't want to raise expectations unduly or falsely, but I'm simply saying this is a matter that must be investigated. Thank you. We'll take any questions. We'll take any questions if any questions.
Good morning. Sophia Philip here from Radio Station Campus. On that list of wrongdoings you have compiled, of the 20 of them, which is the most alarming and why?
Well, I don't know that I can rank them, because you see, most of them go to the very heart of our democracy. But if you ask me, I think that the most frightening, as distinct from alarming, the most alarming, perhaps I should say, is the decision to hire Minister Gregory Bowen as the Attorney General. The most alarming. I cannot believe that the Prime Minister will hire a non-attorney to be the Attorney General. I mean, if somebody had told me that that was done or could have been done or would have been done, I would have fallen flat on my face. So this is the most alarming. It is absolutely staggering that something like this can be done in Grenada. And what is more, that people have remained so quiet about it. The media, the churches, all of the bodies that are supposed to be looking at these things are not saying a word. Not a single word. You know that the Attorney General is not an attorney. This is unbelievable. It is unbelievable. So in that sense, it is the most alarming. Yes? The most disturbing, perhaps, is what is happening with the electoral office. Because the outcome of any election in Grenada, to be fair and to be free and to be respected by all, to avoid the risk of chaos, to avoid the risk of confusion, to avoid the risk of instability and political uprising and riots and any climate of instability, elections must be free and fair. To ensure that they are free and fair, the integrity of the voter registration system and the electoral office is sacrosanct and paramount. It means that those in authority must accept the impartiality of the office, must accept the impartiality of the supervisor, must accept the impartiality and professionalism of those who are running that office, and not try to bully them into positions that are against the Constitution in order to gain an unfair advantage for your political party. Because if, for example, the Prime Minister is able to sit in his office and access by computer the electoral office and the voter registration system, yeah? It allows him to say, listen, from what we can tell, 30,000 people have registered, 30,000 people have not yet registered. But the 30,000 people that have registered, we assess that 24,000 of those are NNP people, and 6,000 of those are NDC people. So the 30,000 that have not registered, we're not going to wait for them to register, we're calling the election right now. Because I have the freedom to see when an election is called, whether it's 3 years, 3.5 years, 4 years, or whatever else. It gives, in other words, the ruling party a distinct political advantage and puts the opposition at a distinct disadvantage. Because the person making the decision is also controlling the entire process, which is supposed to be independent. And it is precisely for that reason that the Constitution, which is the supreme law, protects the integrity and impartiality of the office of the supervisor of elections. It says that the Governor General must choose that person, and once the Governor General chooses that person must not answer to any other person or authority. So the Cabinet has absolutely no authority to take a decision like the one it has taken, to install internet services and to establish a shared network between the electoral office and the office of the Prime Minister. This is unbelievable in any civilized country.
Just to clarify, forgive me, but this is the first I'm hearing of Mr. Bowen's appointment as Attorney General. Just to clarify, has he or is he acting as AG or has he replaced Mr. Bowen?
No, he was acting, not today.
Okay.
Let me say that this has actually happened on 2 occasions. And I should mention to you that this is published in the Government Gazette, which is the official publication of the Government of Grenada, which is done weekly. So the media ought to be sent copies of this every week. And if you don't get copies of this every week, you have to find a way to get it. Because the real news of the government comes here. The real news from the government of Grenada is not what you hear on GIS. GIS is sensation stuff. Yeah, this is the law. This is the official voice of the government of Grenada. Yeah, so you need to see anybody that is, if one minister goes out of the country and somebody is acting for 2 days, the Governor General has to appoint that person and it has to be published here. If it's not done, then the appointment is not valid. Yeah, so this is the official voice of the government of Grenada, the Government Gazette. And I'm saying to you, every week you need to see this. Because in September, the Attorney General went away for a week or so, and Minister Bowen was acting as Attorney General. And then again in February, The Attorney General went out of the country and Minister Bowen was acting as Attorney General. I'm shocked to hear that the media did not know this.
Senator, if I am considered a part of the media, then you can rightfully see that that I am aware of this, and in fact we had a number of programs highlighting some of these. We can make it a duty on Friday to collect all these gazettes so that I can bring it to the public, in the public domain. So again, maybe part of the media will not be aware of this.
We want to encourage it because you will see things in there that are very useful, you know. I think it's important.
We have the lady. We have a lady before you and then George. Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Mr. Burke, as a former government minister and using probably your legal expertise here, your concerns regarding the payment of, you refer to them as government backbenchers, but I have been told that they cannot be considered as government backbenchers. They have never been assigned a ministerial portfolio. So I wanted to get from you, you would have had to deal within your past government, actual government backbenchers within your government at the time. So I want to know, is there legal basis for this present administration to be paying parliamentary representatives, which is what they are, ministers, a government minister's salary?
Well, first of all, I'm not referring to them as government backbenchers. You will notice I did not say that. But, the question that you're asking is, I think Senator Vincent was speaking about government backbenchers, but you're asking whether the MPs who are not ministers, if there's a basis to pay them a ministerial salary. I'm not aware of any such basis at all. You see? Now there are two things here. One is that the practice has been that if an MP is not a minister, they get an allowance, a stipend. Yes? While we were MPs, not being ministers of government, as it turned out, of course, we were in opposition, but that should not make a difference because an MP is an MP, whether you're in government or you're not in government, whether your party is in or not, because the Constitution really does not recognize political parties. The Constitution does not have the word party mentioned in it at all. They are political party. So the Constitution recognizes members of parliament, people who are elected or people who are appointed as senators. And if you're an MP, regardless of the party that you're from, you have the same entitlements as any other MP, opposition or government. When we were in opposition, we were paid as MPs, not being ministers, we were paid about $1,100 total. Yes, I please do not quote me on the exact number now, I can't remember, but I know it did not exceed $1,200, $1,100 and some. The opposition leader, as he then was, Tilman Thomas, got something more than that. I think he got about 2,000. With some entertainment allowance and some other things included that we did not get as just regular opposition MPs. But I'm not aware of any, it is within the competence of the government to make payments, to give a stipend, but nobody expects that you will pay them the same as you will pay a minister of government. It seems quite excessive to everybody that you just decide, as a way of getting them up to the ministerial salary, you keep them at the $1,100 or so that is being paid as the basic salary, you heard it, but then you give them what is called a personal allowance of $4,500 and some dollars. So in that way, they bring the number up to the 7,000.
Please, before we go on, I would urge the reporter, madam, to be present tomorrow at the Senate meeting, where in fact the actual word backbencher, all of it is defined very carefully, and it's present in the document, the official government document, in blue folder, presented to all senators. So it's not a speculation, but it's out for open debate to present in minutes.
You're called for persons to come out tomorrow, please God. Can you elaborate a little bit more as to exactly what is expected, what will be done? Will there be a match from a certain position up to the electoral office? Are you asking people to come out to placards? Will there be a letter presented to a particular individual? What exactly can we expect?
Well, we are still working out the final details of that, but I mean in terms of letters and so on, because there will be no person there that we can give a letter to, right? What we are saying really is a symbolic protection of the integrity of that office, yes? So we will go there as an organization. We will be, I suspect, I anticipate, based on the discussion we've had so far, that several people will be carrying placards, will be singing songs, will be giving slogans, will be expressing demands. We hope that you will be there as media people. We'll be calling on the government to put back Mr. McBurney in the position. That is the fundamental issue here. Put back Mr. McBurney in the position and invite Mr. Francois to retake his position if the reason for his resignation is the issue connected to Mr. McBurney. Because really, Mr. McBurney is the best person to do the job. And he is highly respected and highly recognized for his competence in that field.
And one more thing along with the meeting tomorrow, I know that tomorrow is also the Senate. So I'm wondering how is it going to be the assembly for 10 o'clock and Senate is also scheduled for I think it's about 9. Any plans to boycott the Senate?
We'll be there at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
We'll be there at 10 o'clock. We'll be at the electoral office at 10 o'clock.
May I just make a comment here on the Gazette issue? During the previous administration, I used to publish the Gazette on my website. And I saw no reason not to continue doing that when there was a change in government. So I asked that I be continued to be supplied with the document. I have not received one. I've spoken to the PS in there at the time, with Alexander, and I've still not been able to get one. So I want to know, you may not be able to answer this, but why am I being deprived of publishing something which you claim is so important?
Yes, you know, it is regrettable. I don't know the answer, you know, but again, it comes down to this very issue of transparency, of which we've spoken so many times. It appears, because you hear it so often, as some kind of an empty slogan. But it is vital to governance. It's an essential ingredient for good governance. How would people know? In most countries, there is an electronic version of the Gazette, and it is shared with everybody. People read it. You know, it's not that you have to go somewhere and get a copy of the print or something like that. Share the information. You want the public to know. So we really don't understand it ourselves. It's regrettable.
I have one question. It seems to be the last question. Besides the action tomorrow, will there be any step to communicate with external agencies and organizations who hold their democracy and respect for institutions and that kind of stuff by unions?
I'm very glad that you've raised that question, because we see this as an extremely important element of the struggle that must be waged at this time. Our experience tells us that it is only through the appeal to and advocacy with and through some of these international agencies that we may get the government to respond. I mean, the kind of mindset that we're seeing at work here tells us that there's a kind of a mentality of a bully at work, and people seem to be forcing their way on regardless. And therefore, it is our intention to reach out to the Organization of American States on this issue. It's our intention to reach out to the Commonwealth Secretariat, to the CARICOM Secretariat, to the International Press Institute. All of these bodies are going to be contacted to speak about this. And then in relation to some of the other issues as they relate to conflict of interest and the appearance of conflict of interest and the appearance of impropriety as far as politically exposed persons and corruption is concerned, it is our intention to reach out as well to the Inter-American Commission on Corruption. So these are bodies that we must speak to, because they are the custodians, if you like, of the international best practices. And so we must speak to them and let them know what is going on. We will not stop on this, because we recognize that the future of any election in the country the fate of any free and fair election in the country depends on what happens to that office. And the future of our parliament, if I may ask the question, the future and integrity of our parliament, just to answer the lady, the future and integrity of our parliament itself depends on the integrity of the electoral office. So if you don't have a safe and well-functioning electoral office, the parliament itself will become a farce.
Another question. Very briefly, the CBI came up a little while ago in your discourse, but I just want you to confirm for me. I'm hearing that there's a group that wants 1,000 passports under the CBI, and I understand that there's information that 1,000 passports is only the beginning. Apparently, these people want more than 1,000 passports. Do you know anything about it?
I have not heard very much beyond what you've just outlined. But I've heard that as well. You know, what we do know is that if the government does not put in place a proper system for screening as well as for due diligence, we can find that we will go back to the same position we were in before. At the time of the last program, and there's a high risk that Grenada's reputation can again become an issue for us. That will affect us as an investment destination because, believe it or not, genuine investors do not want to be associated with criminal and rogue states. The people who are attracted to that are criminals. Only criminals are attracted to criminal states. Only rogues are attracted to rogue states. The people who will be coming and looking to buy buy passports to do shady stuff are not people like Mr. Wood Stewart of Sandals. Those guys come in, they don't ask for passports. They come in and they set up an investment. They are looking for financial and economic returns on their money. They're not looking for cover to conduct their criminal activities.
Just to follow up, the explanation provided by government for amending that portion of the bill is basically the investors have signaled their intention that they don't want to be known. They want to keep their information private. Do you think that basis is founded? That the investors should at least have some level of privacy if they want to be a part of the program?
We cannot understand why they want to keep it private. Yes, because of course you have to decide if the object of the program is to help hide people or the object of the program is to attract investors. And if a man is coming to Grenada to invest, if his primary motive for getting the passport is to invest and to find a financial opportunity, yes, if he's coming to Grenada to invest but he doesn't want anybody to know who he is, then you have to ask yourself if his real motive is investment. I cannot imagine, for example, Mr. Good Stewart coming to Grenada and hiding and say, I don't want anybody to know who I am. Yeah? Because what he wants to do is set up an investment that everybody gets to know who he is, what is an investment, what he is selling, and get as many people as possible to know about it and to market it and to buy his product. That's what he's looking for. In other words, how can you be looking to produce a good and service, or a good or a service that you want to sell, but you want to hide? In other words, can you imagine somebody saying, can you imagine Digicel saying, I'm selling cell phone, but I don't want anybody to know who I am? Do you see that happening? Can you imagine Flow selling cable service and saying, I don't want anybody to know who I want, I just want to hide? I cannot imagine that.
May I just support what the political leader is saying by pointing out that the previous government hired a consultancy firm, Henley and Partners, who are well known in this field. And I want to take a moment to tell you the conditions in their proposal as to how we should move forward. They saw these as critical safeguards. One, that due diligence be done. Two, that transparency be a critical part of the process. That three, professional standards must be adhered to. That four, independent decision making should be done. And 5, limited direct political involvement. This is how they intended to proceed with this. Understanding it was absolutely imperative that Grenada gets this thing right this time around. They were also going to negotiate on our behalf the Canadian visa restrictions. They were also going to review the whole list of the 980 people which I have here who have been granted Grenadian passports. They were going to negotiate the Schengen visa so that we can get in and out of Europe in such a way that we would not have great restrictions, and the Grenada visa policy was going to be reviewed. So these were 4 ways, and this is a sort of company with integrity that one wants to put into place to be able to ensure your citizenship program is well run, above board, as is the case with other countries. Sad to say, we don't see most of these criteria at all materializing or in practice.
So, brothers and sisters, we have come to the end of our press conference. I want to thank all of you for coming out. And if your cameras are still on, we're going to make a final appeal for all right-thinking Grenadians to come out and join us tomorrow as we picket in support of democracy at the parliamentary elections office tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We're asking you to come in national colors, try to stay away from the political colors and so on. And this is about Grenada and our democracy and not about any, partisan anything. So we thank you again for coming out, and we look forward to fair reporting this evening at lunchtime this evening. Thank you.